Hey there, class. Welcome back. This is a relatively short chapter on motivation and emotion. So welcome. So let's think about what kinds of things do people do that mystify you. I'll tell you there are a lot of things people do that mystify me. I'm mystified that my husband likes to run 5Ks. That he can get out of bed first thing in the morning and immediately start exercising. I'm mystified that my daughter likes to spend her time entering all 1,000 of the most popular boy names and all 1,000 of the most popular girl names into Excel spreadsheets for fun, and then she analyzes them. The other night, my son said that he was going to finish this big, long chapter in his book, and he thought it was going to take him from 6 p.m. until 11 p.m., and I guess apparently it did, but then he decided he had to finish the entire book. So he continued to read until he was done. He went to bed at 6 a.m. Great. So what kinds of things do people do that mystify you? I'm sure there have to be some things. So in this chapter, we've got three sections. There will be 3 video lectures. One will be on motivation. That's this one. One will be on eating, and one will be on emotion. So let's get started with motivation. So motivation is a stimulus or a force that directs behavior, thinking, and persistence. So I am motivated right now to record this lecture because I want to get it done before I have other deadlines due. I want to make sure it's completely in place before I start to teach the class. I want to help you guys learn, and of course, I want to get paid, right? So those are all forces that are working on me to direct my behavior, thinking, and persistence as I record this lecture. So we're going to take a look at a number of different theories of motivation. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, drive reduction theory, arousal theory, pleasure, incentive theory, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and finally, achievement motivation. So motivation refers to forces acting on or within an organism to initiate and direct behavior, both biological, emotional, cognitive, or social forces. All right, so let's start off with the hierarchy of needs. You probably have heard of this before, that's my guess. This is Abraham Maslow's theory. This combines physiological and psychological needs in a hierarchy or a sequence. We're motivated to meet those higher level needs when physiological needs at the base of the hierarchy have been met. So at the bottom of the base are the physiological things. We have to have a balance of our body systems. We have to have food, water, and sleep. And we will risk our security and our shelter and protection in order to get those. There's nothing really more basic to us than this. Once we've met those, then we start to worry about safety. We might feel safe and secure. And we might compromise that in order to get this need met. But we're not going to worry about love and belongingness if we have not yet dealt with safety. Love and belongingness is the need to feel like you're part of a group, to have relationships, family bonds, friends, a sense of community. We don't have those things if we have not met safety needs. And after we've established love and belongingness, then we can begin to work on our esteem needs. The need to achieve, have self-respect, have feelings of independence, like financial independence, completing your education, feeling competent at things. And once we've got that, then we begin to work on what he called self-actualization. Now, this used to be the pinnacle for Maslow. This is self-fulfillment, being the best at your job, expressing your creativity, becoming the very best that you can be. But he discovered that there were some people who actually went beyond becoming their very best and most ideal selves, and instead they became self-transcendent. They extended beyond the self. They were dedicated to a cause. Maybe they had deep spiritual experiences. Maybe they supported other people's goals. So you can think, it looks as though it's a sequence, and it says that here, but I will say there are times when we will go out of sequence. For example, I have read the work of Jonathan Causel quite a bit. He writes about homelessness in America, particularly in New York City, And in one of his books called Rachel and Her Children, he tells a little story about Rachel, a mother with some young kids living in a really awful homeless shelter in New York City. And she is so poor and so alone in the world. And she's getting food stamps and she's getting support from the government, but it's not enough. And at some point, they've run out of the bologna and milk that they have bought, and the children need food. And so she goes out in the world. She goes out of the building and stands on the corner to prostitute herself. And she's in a very unsafe situation. And the guy, puts a gun to her head and she can't leave. She's gone all night. And it's really just a heart-wrenching story. But I would say, you might say, well, she sacrificed her safety for physiological needs. But this typically refers to our own. I think what she sacrificed was her safety for love and belongingness. In that case, she wanted to take care of her children. She worried about her family bonds more than she was worried about her safety. So there's an example of where we will sometimes get it a little bit out of sequence. Most of us, according to Maslow, don't achieve self-actualization. Most of us are going to end up here. Most of us don't actually realize our fullest potential for various reasons. And it's really very few people who achieve self-transcendence. Think Mother Teresa or Mahatma Gandhi, people like that. Okay, so there's Maslow. So there are caveats on Maslow. The sequence is not set in stone. Sometimes people will abandon their physiological needs in order to meet higher needs, like we saw over here. Rachel abandoned safety in order to achieve love and belongingness. And safety can be abandoned for a higher purpose. So I would just encourage you to think a little bit about Maslow. Think of any instances where you've seen safety sacrificed for a higher purpose. We actually see it quite a bit. I would say Mother Teresa and Gandhi probably were doing that. Okay, the next one is called drive reduction theory. We have physiological needs that have to be maintained at a baseline in order to ensure our existence. So our bodies will want to maintain those constant states through internal controls, and that process is called homeostasis. Homeostasis is where we're in balance, and then we're constantly monitoring levels. If we're above or below, the body will try to restore some equilibrium. So over here we have the person is at equilibrium, but then the balance is disturbed by deprivation. This person needs food and water, and that creates a drive. You experience the hunger drive or the thirst drive, and that drives behavior, and that's eating and drinking behavior, which restores the equilibrium. Examples of drives are eating, drinking, sleeping, seeking comfort, having sex, getting warm, getting cooler, and once the need is satisfied, the drive is reduced, at least temporarily. Drive reduction theory is super useful in understanding how physiological needs can be motivators. So if you want to explain why somebody has come home from a long day at work and is ravenously eating, or somebody has just run a 5K and they're chugging Gatorade, this is your target motivation theory. But it's not real good at explaining everything. Why do people climb a mountain? Why do people go to college? Why do people drive too fast? This really has nothing to say about that. So it's not that this is wrong, it's that each of these is only part of the story. So arousal theory might explain why somebody might climb a mountain. Or goes, skiing and jump off a cliff. Or it's going to explain why monkeys are playing with this lock, even though the lock doesn't open anything and isn't going to get them anything. They're doing it just because it's fun, and they're doing that primarily because it's fun. Now, what's fun about it? Well, it's that feeling of arousal. People experience very high levels of arousal as being unpleasant, and they often will experience very low levels of arousal as being unpleasant. That feeling of boredom, We don't like that. And so we will tend to seek out some kind of stimulation. When arousal is too low, we're bored and we want to increase arousal. When arousal is too high, we reduce it. I'm very sensitive to sound. I'm constantly going outside my office and where there's a big room with lots of people and saying, shh, can you keep it down a little bit, because it's too much arousal for me. Introverts tend to be a little bit too easily aroused, and then so an introvert really is not going to study at a Starbucks. It's too much going on. Whereas an extrovert tends to have a higher threshold for arousal. They like more arousal. So an extrovert typically will not study in their room in silence, right? If you're an extrovert, you know what I mean. So we tend to want to maintain an optimal level of arousal, and this is supported by sensation-seeking behavior. If you take big risks, if you seek out a novel environment, that is arousal theory. So boredom drives curiosity. If we're too bored, our level of arousal is too low, then we try to engage in some activity. This is kind of our optimum level of arousal. And then over here, sensation seekers are happy over here. Any sensation seekers out there, you love adrenaline rushes, you love new activities. The more dangerous and scary, the better. If that's you, you have probably a higher threshold for arousal. All right, let's think about the pleasure principle. So Freud is the first, or he's the primary person who discusses the pleasure principle. He says that we are motivated by the id, which you guys, we haven't covered this yet, but we will later in the semester. The id is that part of you that when you're born, it's already there, and it wants what it wants, and it wants it right now. And it wants pleasure, and it wants to absolutely avoid pain at all costs. So this will explain, I think he's experiencing some pleasure there as he's being petted by his owner or his mom, whatever you want to say. She's experiencing pleasure out here in the garden with the flowers and the lovely food and drink. Sometimes we just do things because it's nice. So we might eat dessert even when we're not hungry, right? Have you ever had the pie at Thanksgiving even though you were full, or the cake because it was somebody's birthday even though you were full? That's because of pleasure. Or there could be another thing going on there. It could be that you're doing it so as not to be the weird one. Or to make the cake, or the cake maker or the baker feel good. Okay, so this relates to evolutionary theory too, because behaviors that produce pleasure are often really good for us, whereas behaviors that produce pain are often bad for us. So food is pleasurable. That tends to be good for us, at least it used to be when we needed all those calories. Tiger, having a fight with somebody, that feels bad. It's better for us not to be doing that. All right, there's the pleasure principle. Incentive theory. We do a lot of things because we have incentives. Incentives are external objects or goals. It's not internal, okay? It's external to us, and it motivates our behavior. So you study to get a good grade or to avoid a bad grade. Does this remind you of any other theory? I hope so. When did we talk about where you're getting good things or bad things in response to your behaviors? I slap you with a fish if you're coming late to class. I praise you and say, that was amazing, when you ask a really interesting question or answer my questions in class. Your boss praises you. Your boyfriend or girlfriend says, complains to you about you leaving, the bathroom counter messy. Those are rewards and punishments, right? That's basically the same idea as incentive theory. External objects and goals rather than internal factors that motivate behavior. So there are incentive theory is related to this idea of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is outside of incentive theory. Extrinsic motivation is part of incentive theory. Incentive theory is where there's something external to you. Extrinsic motivation is you continue to do something because of external reinforcers. The urge to do the behavior comes from outside of you. So you read a textbook because there's going to be a quiz. You work out because you want a six-pack. But the rewards, there could be a real trick here. Sometimes having a reward for something like that can actually undermine our intrinsic motivation. So let's think about intrinsic motivation. This is where you want to do a behavior because of internal reinforcers. The urge to do the behavior comes from within. So you read a good novel because it's so interesting. My son read his entire novel he finished it in 12 hours and stayed up till 6 a.m. Because he was internally motivated, because it was interesting. Hannah sits there and enters all this data for fun. We work out because it feels good. Mark, I think, runs primarily because it makes him feel better. So those are all internal. So let's get back to this idea that external rewards can reduce intrinsic motivation. It's because we lose the self-regulation and we don't feel responsible for our own behaviors. Let me make this concrete for you. When my kids were little, we would go to the library all the time. And especially in the summer when there was less going on and more reading time, we would go to the library. And I would always sign them up for the library summer reading program. And then, they would get terrible prizes like a coupon for a free donut or a rubber eraser, or the big prize at the end was a circus ticket. Of course, that meant I was going to have to buy other circus tickets. So it really wasn't much of a reward for me. Anyway, at first, the first few years, they were really into it. And they would get the little sheet and they would fill in the little bubbles that would say they'd read 15 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, whatever it was. And by about the third year or so, though, I noticed that they were reading less on their own. And I began to realize that reading for the rewards was undermining their natural intrinsic motivation to read. And so we stopped doing the library summer reading programs. And so this was terribly embarrassing. We still went to the library. We still read all summer. But we would go to the children's area and they would say, "Oh, ma'am, are your kids signed up for the summer reading program?" And I'd have to say, "No, they're not." And they would look at me like I was the worst mother of all time. But, and I didn't want to get into a big discussion of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and how extrinsic motivation can actually undermine my children's natural motivation to read. But that's what I was thinking. Okay. I really like this theory. This next one is achievement motivation. People differ in how motivated they are to achieve long-term goals. Some people are very high in achievement motivation and are very motivated to achieve long-term goals, and some people are low in this. Here's some interesting factoids about these two different types of people. People who are high in achievement motivation tend to sit at the front of the classroom. They tend to get better grades, especially in their career classes. They tend to have realistic career aspirations. So they're neither too high nor too low. So somebody wants to be a registered nurse, which might be realistic for them. It's not too low, like saying, well, I'll be a certified nursing assistant. Maybe that was too easy for them, but maybe being a full medical doctor was too hard. Who knows? They have realistic expectations. They set challenging goals, but these are obtainable goals. Let's contrast this with people who are low in achievement motivation. They will tend to set extremely easy or impossibly high goals. Okay, so I like to test this in class a little bit. It's not a real test, but I'll get the garbage can out and an eraser from the board. And I'll say, okay, I'll set that up at the front. I'll say, come on over and toss the eraser into the trash can like you're throwing a basketball through a hoop. And you can stand wherever you want. And what'll tend to happen is some people will pick a moderate distance. Some people will just walk right up to it and dump it in. And some people will try to like plaster themselves to the wall and throw it as far as they can. And as long as no group norm develops, sometimes a group norm will develop and everybody will go to the same place. But if that does not happen, people do according to what they want to do, it can potentially tell us something about achievement motivation. So the person who walks right up to it and just drops it in, that is a very low goal. right? And they're probably low in achievement motivation. Somebody who stands at the very back of the wall possibly has, that's an impossibly high goal. So maybe they have low achievement motivation. And then somebody who picks a distance that's pretty far but achievable, maybe has high. So delay of gratification is definitely related to achievement motivation. People who are high in achievement motivation tend to be very capable of delaying gratification in order to achieve those goals. Okay, so I'm going to assign a discussion board this week. We're going to try to make this a little bit fun. I want you to imagine that I come into class. Imagine that we're in person. Imagine I walk into the classroom and I am not remotely motivated to teach you anything. Or, I don't know, you flip on your video and I'm all like, ugh. Okay, I want you to use at least 3 of our motivation theories to explain my behavior. Try to be creative. Try to give an explanation that nobody else has given or would give. And I want you to offer up 3 of those. So take a look at the discussion board and practice on the theories of motivation. Have fun.